Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to a little afternoon show that I am doing. I'm doing an impromptu show video that I'm recording as an SMM recap. I'm Gods from Ghostly Gamers Broadcasting, and going to have a little discussion about SMM here, my thoughts on the event, what went down, from an impartial, as impartial as I can be. I'm hoping to stay away from being biased, and as an observer to the event, I like to feel I can be. I can just sort of comment on what happened from the sidelines. There's a lot of drama to sort through. Most significantly, the whole big issue with EG actually boycotting the event eventually, and there were a few surprises with the results as well. So we're going to hop right into it, guys. The SMM recap. Here we go. Firstly, a bit of discussion about what exactly was SMM. It was a huge LAN event, probably one of the biggest Dota 1 LAN events of the year. At least the past few years, it was the Dota 1 LAN event. It was the last tournament of the year for one thing, so you're ending the year with this event. In terms of prize pool, it's been one of the biggest. I believe there are a few sort of Chinese tournaments which are sort of competing in terms of prize pool, but it's basically the biggest international LAN Dota 1 event of the year. And it happens right at the end of the year, so it's a fantastic way to end the year. This year, the actual international team list wasn't as impressive because most of the European teams have already made the switch to Dota 2. So with that switch happening, there weren't as many being representative. We're going to have a look at the team list and yada yada. The groups now, as we're going to go right into it, guys. And what have we got? Here we go, guys. That's the groups there. So that's how basically teams were put into Tier 1 teams, Tier 2 teams, Tier 3 teams. There actually was a bit of discrepancy there, a bit of sort of like how did they actually decide who's Tier 1, who's Tier 2. Your Tier 1 teams, all the Chinese teams were put into Tier 1, as well as 3 or 4 Malaysian teams, which kind of led to people saying, oh, are the organisers being a bit biased? Well, I'd say yes, they are, but it's their tournament. They can run it how they want. That's what you have to remember, is that these teams signed up. They structured it so there would be 2 international teams in each group, as well as then they throw in the Malaysian qualified teams. But yeah, I mean, the organizers, they can basically, I mean, they basically had full disclosure. They could basically decide who was Tier 1, who was Tier 2, who was Tier 3. Then they got one team from each of those different tiers, put them in, and there were a number of sort of Malaysian teams in that Tier 1 list. So they did obviously get an easier bracket. Because of that, they didn't get put in with some of those top Chinese teams. When I'm saying that, I believe it was Orange and MUFC were put in the Tier 1 list, but those 2 teams have had great recent offline results, so I can't really say I disagree there. Anyways, looking at the groups, we're going to have a bit of a discussion there. I don't think Group A is... some of these groups aren't entirely completed. There were a few more teams that came through the qualifier and joined, but none of those teams actually... I mean, they came through qualifier, they didn't actually do all that well. Group A, this was one of the most interesting. This was ended in a 3-way tie, I believe. And I'm not actually sure who goes. We're going to have a look at who goes through later. But Group A, definitely quite interesting with 3 strong teams. There's no really clear second place team. I'd say MUFC definitely the favourite to win here. Moving on to Group B, C, D. B, we've got Myth Trust. As well as KSJJ, who was sort of one of the highly ranked Malaysian teams who just sort of got put together for this event. But this is a fairly weak group overall, I'd say. Group C, you've got MSPR, which is Yamata's team, so a very strong team there, as well as some strong Indonesian teams, but not much known of them. Then you get to the groups with the Chinese teams. This is where you really start seeing, well, the dominating team. So you've got Nirvana CN put in with Neolution Esports and Poor PMS Asterix, very tough group for them. You've got IGY's group, which has G7 and Ideal, the Thai team, as well as the G7. So not 2 sort of unknown teams in Southeast Asia. Then you get to DK's group, where they've got Immortality and some Malaysian teams. Group G, Mineski and Orange Esports, a bit of a grudge match. There definitely has been some bad blood in the past one, but they do get along really well. They're clear favourites there. And then Group H, you've got LGD and EG. That's probably one of the toughest groups. I mean, especially when you throw in Invasion Red, who are a Malaysian team who've had some great results in the past. So there's definitely a lot of talent in this group. But as far as the group stages went, let's talk about the group stages. There were no real big surprises. There was 1 or 2 small upsets. The Chinese teams all pretty much finished top of their groups without dropping a game. Group A, I believe, Group A saw MUFC winning their group. Group B saw Myth Trust and KSJJ going through. Group C, MSPR went through, as well as, I believe, Velocity Hyper, I want to say. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're going to have a look at the playoff bracket in a bit. The big thing to talk about here with SMM as a whole is there were a lot of technical problems. What happened was at the event, the hardware sponsor that SMM had pulled out 2 days before the event. So they had to go to local cyber cafes, internet cafes, or whatever you want to call them. They went to them and had to borrow computers or hire them, basically. So it didn't really work. They had 2 days to set it all up. They didn't get... A lot fell through, and the organization had a lot of problems to deal with. There were a lot of blue screens. There were a lot of disconnects, save files being lost. There were a lot of problems, and this is basically a lot of delays as well, which led to a lot of the drama later on in the tournament, specifically with EG. But important to note is that it affected every team. Every team had delays. Every team suffered blue screens and disconnect problems, and as a result, maybe had to remake a game when they lost an advantage they previously had. So a lot of teams were hard done by because of it, and it did cause a lot of delays and upset teams, but it's something that all the teams had to deal with here, and it's something which really it does fall upon the tournament organizations. They're at fault, but it did they lost their hardware sponsor 2 days before, so it is I mean, from my point of view, I can understand what actually happened there. Anyways, moving on, guys, what happened here? We're going to go right into what actually came out of the group stage. This means who made it through, got through to the winner-loser bracket. There you go. There's some spoilers. Spoilers are all over. First of Group A, you've got MUFC versus EG. This is definitely the most interesting first round match here, I want to say, or probably one of the most interesting ones. Mythcraft versus Orange, another very interesting match. MSPR, Immortality, I believe the Indonesian team, Immortality. Nirvana CN versus G7. And then we move on to IG versus Neolution, DK versus Velocity Hyper, Mineski versus KingSurf JJ, and LGD versus Aeon Esports. Aeon, who did get through that Group A, so I believe it was Execration who didn't make it through Group A. The other Filipino team who were obviously very disappointed by that. There was a three-way tie. They had to replay matches, and in the end, the Execration did not get through. So what happened here? Looking at the first round matches, no real surprise. The Chinese teams, they got through. They're all, when it comes, basically, in terms of predictions favorites, China are the favorites. That's basically the given rule. China at the moment in Dota 1 are at the top of the scene. They know so much more about the metagame than anyone else. So no real surprises there, seeing them win all their matches. MUFC versus EG, that was probably one of the closer contender games. EG won that match and made it through to the next round. Mythcraft versus Orange, another highly contested match, but Orange have been in really poor form of late. It doesn't seem to be working as a team. They've got some very talented players, Mushi, Winter, they've got great talent, but the teamwork, the actual strategies they use, they're not having results. They've been training non-stop, they're going to China, they've been competing with these top Chinese teams. You'd think that something would have come together. They would have figured out how to actually work on this teamwork or make some adjustments to their roster, but it just hasn't come together, which did actually end up in Mushi leaving the team. Well, he is now their coach, I believe, but he has left the team as a player because I think he's realized it's just not working the team, and there needs to be some changes. Anyway, so Orange lose to Mythtrust. I wasn't that surprised. I mean, Orange have been somewhat disappointing results over the last month or two. They won ESTC, but since then these other teams have gone better, while Orange haven't gone better, I feel. So Mythtrust, Mineski, all these Asian teams putting in the practice and really improving before this tournament. Then we get into the lower parts of the bracket. As I said, the Chinese team's going through. MSPR, which is Yamata's team, did do fairly well this tournament, winning their match. Looking at the bottom half of the bracket, no real surprises. We see the three Chinese teams going through, as well as Mineski, and this is something that is interesting. There's 4 Chinese teams, and they've got 3 in the bottom half of the bracket, and 1 at the top half of the bracket. So if the Chinese teams are supposedly the top 4 teams in the world, well, I mean, okay, actually, no, that's all I'm trying to say. Basically, what this means is Nirvana CN, who some believe were the weakest of the 4 Chinese teams at this event, because they have, basically, their star player, King J, could not attend because of a passport issue. But basically, even if without him, they're still the 4th best team, they get through to the winner bracket finals, which means they're guaranteed top 3 finishing, even though they don't have to verse some of these other top teams. They're going to avoid versing one of these other top Chinese teams and may luck out on a top 3 finishing when they're maybe not deserving of that. So, just a small issue I had with the bracket, but it's what happens when you have such a big big pool of teams. Moving on from there, looking at the second round of matches. This is where we have the real drama. This is what we're going to be talking about most. EG versus Mythtrust. There was drama, guys. We're going to get right into it because that is what most people want to hear about. They want to know what happened. They want to know what it means. Esports, what it means for Dota as an esport, because where do we move from here? How do we improve events for the future? And we're going to get right into that, guys, as I do pop up my next little screen. Here we go, the EG Injustice. I'm calling it Injustice because, without a doubt, no one is denying the fact that what happened to EG sucks. I mean, they were hard done by. They were on the receiving end of some bad luck. Whether it was a bad decision, that's debatable, but they were on the receiving end of some really, really bad luck, and it wasn't really fair for them that it happened to them. But with that said, it's an issue that did happen to a lot of teams. We're going to talk about what exactly happened to them for those of you who don't know, or for those of you who sort of have heard the rumors, maybe rumors about Mythtrust who turned off their computer or unplugged something to force this remake. It's not actually true, guys. Anyways, here is what happened. This is the more or less facts that have come out. Here we have, on the left side, that way, we've got Demon's statement of what happened, and this is pretty much not been denied. There's at the bottom you'll see there is no replay of the actual game, but what has happened is 16 minutes into the game, Mythtrust, their Crystal Maiden drops. That's blue screen drops. I believe it's just I wasn't actually sure if it was a blue screen or not, but yeah, the CM dropped. There's marshals behind Mythtrust, so obviously there's no foul play at work, or these marshals would have noticed. But at this point in the game, Silver has Radiance, Beastmaster almost pipe. Basically, EG have a huge item advantage. All the heroes are doing so well. The anti-mage on Mythtrust not doing so well. Doesn't have B Fury yet, and it's just not farming all that well. The score is 8-4 in EG's favor, but I mean, obviously, you look at the kill score, it's 8-4, not that big of a difference. But the item difference, the farm difference, the tower difference is massive. EG have this game. There's just maybe a 2% chance or something that Mythtrust can win. But then the DC, looking at the rules. This quote here is the rules in the middle of Demon's post. In the event a save file is lost after 20 minutes of gameplay, the game marshal holds yada yada. Basically, if it's before 20 minutes, it has to be remade from a save, or from a recent save if there is one, or from the start. And it was before 20 minutes. The problem is this rule doesn't take into account that a game can be pretty much decided 15 minutes in, with the way that, I mean, if this was a year ago when Dota metagame you had sort of Medusa versus Drow Rangers in 80-minute games, then yeah, this is maybe a rule that applies. But this Dota now is fast-paced. Games are decided in the first 20 minutes. That's when games get decided, that early game there. Sometimes you'll have a game at 20 minutes, which is still even, but most games are decided in that first 20 minutes. So this rule can be a bit questionable. What happened then is, so basically with this drop, what happened is the game got remade. It had to be remade. The marshals were enforcing the rules that were there. SMM, the tournament organizers, the tournament marshals got attacked for basically not giving EG the win here. EG wanted the win. They basically said, we have this game. There's no way we're going to lose this. But rules of rules. These marshals are put on the spot. They cannot make a decision that goes against the rules. Making a decision that defies the rules is just not something you can do at a big, prestigious Dota tournament. You can't say, screw the rules, EG we're going to... It looks like EG we're going to win, we're going to give EG the win. You can't do that, unfortunately. So, giving Mythtrust the remake, well, it's not fair, but it has to be done, because the rules are there, and you can't just throw them away because of this injustice. It's something that happened to a lot of teams, as said, and as a result, EG had to play the game again. So the game was played again, and EG lost. That's the big thing there. EG were obviously upset, frustrated, did not play as well as they'd like, and the game went differently. EG lost it. And then EG, they were pissed off. This was after losing. So whether or not they agreed to the remake, it was more they were forced to play a remake. And at the time, they're not going to say, no, we're not playing the replay, we're just going to leave and take the loss or forfeit the match. They obviously played the remake thinking they can win it, and obviously just a bit upset, ended up losing. And then after they lost, hell broke loose. Misery, who obviously is known not for his great manners, he flamed the marshals. There was swearing involved. The exact quote that he said to Mythtrust's face was "congratulations," which is not cool. It's not cool. Myth Trust. This is what I want to focus. This is what I'm going to focus on now, and then move on from, because I don't want to talk about Myth Trust much. What Myth Trust did in this situation, with their actual decision to force the remake, they were in the right. It's their right to force that remake. The rules say it's a remake. Myth Trust go to the marshals, say we want a remake. Then it should be a remake. If they don't want to forfeit, they don't have to. They followed the rules. They enforced the rules. Myth Trust are not the bad guys. They didn't plug pull. The disconnect was out of their control. They're on the receiving end of some good fortune, but they didn't break any rules at all. So you can't attack them. Do not attack Myth Trust. People brought up the fact that Orange forfeited. Basically, a similar situation happened to Orange where they gave their opponents a win. It's irrelevant. I mean, this is a different team. What Orange did was maybe different circumstances. The game was maybe more decided. But regardless, the fact is, Myth Trust were entirely in the right, in the clear. They can request that remake and play the game again. So we're not going to talk about how Myth Trust dealt with this situation, because as far as that decision goes, there's no problem with what they did. There's obviously some talk about how they flamed EG a bit after the game on their Facebooks and said, GG noobs or whatever, which is obviously not mannered, but it's not directly what happened, and it didn't really... It was more sort of the team-to-team discourse that happened because there was flaming going back and forth. What's more important is the way EG... It's more sort of the EG versus the tournament organization's issue. So we're going to talk a bit about that. EG, they flame the marshals, they say then they basically decide to boycott the competition. So this statement here by Misery in the bottom left, boycotting SMM, not going to play from loser bracket. What happened today was beyond stupidity. Worthless tournament, worthless organizers. Good luck next year, SMM. So EG decide, hey, we're done, we're quitting. We don't want to play through the loser bracket. We deserve to have won that match. They were, as said, they were probably going to win it, but there was no... SMM enforced their rules. If they didn't agree with the rules, they could have brought it up before the tournament. I think the bigger issue was the build-up. There were so many technical problems. The tournament as a whole did not go very successfully, and they just felt, well, someone's going to make a stand. Let's make the stand ourselves. So... that's what we need to change, guys. Oh, there we go. I fixed it. So they wanted to make a stand and basically protest. What followed was, let's have a little look. What do my notes say? Then come next day, there was nothing official right away. Come next day, Myth Trust actually went to the tournament organizers and said, we'll agree to a remake. And this is something where I felt EG, they basically pressured Myth Trust. They basically tarnished Myth Trust names, calling them cheaters. Okay, that's putting words in their mouth. They didn't call them cheaters. But the entire community as a whole was on EG's side initially. They were just like, wow, EG got screwed over. Why didn't they get the win? Myth Trust should have given them the win, and Myth Trust's name and team was just basically, I mean, gone to shit because of this issue. And they felt so bad, they said, okay, we've got to improve our image, and we're going to give them the remake. They then offered to give them a forfeit win, and I mean, SML organizers said, no, we're not going to allow a rematch. We have a schedule. And I mean, this is after EG basically flamed the hell out of the tournament, said it's a shit tournament, we're boycotting, yada yada, it's worthless. Why should they do that? Not to mention another issue which I didn't bring up. When after they actually lost the remake, Demon apparently smashed his monitor. What actually happened from the person who was from a Ghost crew member who was there, apparently he slapped it and then it just fell over. It didn't actually break. There was no monitors breaking, but he slapped the monitor. It fell over basically onto the table, I imagine, and that was that. But there was... Either way you look at it, it's not professional. These guys are representing one of the biggest sponsors, EG, and acting like kids. So that I was not impressed by EG. So how EG reacted was obviously childish. They took a very, very immature initial response. They were obviously very emotional. I can understand. They were hard done by. They deserved to be pissed off, but they did not have the right to deal with it like this. They shouldn't have flamed their opponents. They shouldn't have flamed the tournament. If they want to boycott, sure, they can do that. They are in their right to boycott the event, but they shouldn't have done it like this. They should have said, all right, we don't want to continue playing. We're going to boycott the event. Basically, they should be mannered and professional about it, and they would have got more support. Instead, they're going to get people getting on their back saying, you guys just acted like kids. You're rage quitting the tournament because, well, you just are pissed off, and you obviously maybe scared that you're going to lose again later in the tournament and then end up with a bad placing. Obviously, that's what people will say whatever. So As a result, EG, I think they went about this in the wrong way. I mean, well, definitely would say that. Moving on, anyway. So, well, not moving on completely on this issue still. We have the community reaction. So, this is summed up by two main groups: the people who support EG's decision, the people who are like, EG, a bunch of kids. The people who support EG's decision, they're the ones who say they were robbed, they should have been given the win. Well, as said before, they should not have been given the win. The rules are there to be followed. You can't just change the rules. As far as the tournament marshal's decision, they had to make the decision. Whether it was the fair one or not, it was a decision that had to be made. Then you have the people who are saying Mish should have forfeited the match, but as said, they're in the right to force that remake. And then you have the actual people who agree with them to boycott the tournament. So that in itself is... Oh, excuse me. That in itself is, well, it's sort of a person by person... That's where the sort of the mixed reactions come. Some say they should have kept playing. Some say, well, yep, you should make a stand and boycott the competition. Then the people who say... Then you have the EG non-supporters, the ones who basically say... They're representing EG, they flame their opponents, they basically acted like kids, and I don't care what anyone says, whether they were winning or not, they can't act like that. So, they're the two major sides. Then you have the sort of the neutral people who can kind of say, well, EG, once all is said and done, they could have played on, they could have just manned up, played on, and despite the bad conditions, just play through the loser bracket, but at the same time, they're within their right to boycott the competition, and good for them for making that decision. So, we're going to have a little talk here. We've got, actually, Z Muffin Man, a member of the Gosu Gamers just community, who wrote a blog, Is Quitting Respectable? This, I think, for the starters, the title is low. You have to make it, quitting versus boycotting. What is the difference? Is there any difference? Yes, of course there's a difference. Boycott, they're making a protest. They're saying, this is not acceptable what you've done. We don't want to participate anymore. Quitting is, I mean, it's a form of quitting. But quitting just has all the negative connotations associated with it, whereas boycotting is making a stand for something that you believe is right. Quitting is giving up. So that's summed up. And I mean, some people think there's a bit of both going on. Basically what this blog is saying, I'm not going to look too much into it. If you want to check it out yourself, it's gosugamers.net/dota/blogs. There's been quite a lot of response to this, which is why I bring it up. There's been about a few hundred comments on there. Basically explains the story in whole and the whole look at quitting, and ends with quitters never win and winners never quit. I think it's basically trying to say if EG wanted to be the heroes of this story, they should have protested. They should have, well, not so much as protest. They should have let their discontent with the decision be known, but then they should have fought through the loser bracket. They would have had so much support if they had just played through that loser bracket. Every match they won, they would have gotten fans. Even when they eventually lost, people would have said, well, they were hard done by it, they should have done better, and no one would really deny it. It's not something you can deny. And it was just a matter of basically saying they should have played on, use this as a learning experience, whereas boycotting it, they gained very little. I brought up a couple of responses here. The first one is from Awareness. Basically, his stance, obviously an EG supporter, is that EG are making a brave response by boycotting. They are saying we've had enough, and let's see, if EG keeps up after this situation, they will imply that the tournament marshal's admin can do whatever they want with no repercussions apart from a forum post. I think this is obviously a very one-sided view on the matter. I mean, there's other ways of protesting apart from boycotting the event. Obviously, SMM's reputation's already gone to shit to some extent because of this event, and I think boycotting it. I mean, I don't think it's brave. That's probably the last word I'd use to describe their boycott. It's not brave. It's more sort of attention-seeking, which is obviously makes it sound like it's a bad thing to do. But obviously, they deserve attention for what happened, and it needs to be brought to attention so that future tournaments can improve. They can just make the tournaments to follow even better and not have these same problems. This was my favorite response to the entire blog. This basically summed up so much my thoughts as well. Max, who clicked his profile, he's actually a civil engineer, so obviously a smart guy. And it shows. He says, I believe both ways of acting are correct. So quitting, basically boycotting, or continuing to play. Basically he's talking about whether you boycott or play through the loser bracket. He's saying Both ways of acting are correct. The decision is taken by personalities. Difference here is perception, and this is shaped from life experience. Basically, he goes on to say, boycotting the tournament is a fair action, considering the tournament reputation has gone down the drain. And then he also says, on the other hand, if EG would have kept fighting, people would admire their courage on taking a blow and getting on their feet again. Yet this may be approached as EG can be bullied down. So he's saying, either way, EG make a good decision. It's just one of those situations where they could have taken either path, and it just depends on the personality of the players. And when it comes down to it, EG, they were fed up. Their decision, they were in the right to make it. The last thing I want to talk about on this EG issue is their sponsors. EG, the actual organization, have yet to make any response on this themselves, which makes me think, I'm sure there's been some contact between the players and the organization, but they've yet to make any actual official statement whether there was a decision the players made, whether it was the organization who made it. They haven't said anything on the matter. And the other thing is, these players were representing their sponsor and got sponsored to go all the way from the US to China and then to Malaysia, and here they are pulling out of the competition. I mean, once you're there, these players, foremost, they play Dota because they love it. They got good at it and used that to, obviously, they quite happily got sponsored and used the opportunities that came to them, but they play Dota because they love it. Why not just go into those last few matches in the loser bracket, say, we love Dota, we're here to play Dota. Obviously, this tournament is being poorly run, but just play Dota. Rather than tarnish their sponsor's name to some extent, but at the same time, the attention, it's either way, EG look like they were hard done by. No one is denying it. This was an injustice. And we're going to move on, guys, because this has gone way, way, way much longer than I expected. So, moving on. Basically, sum this up. The community, this was a huge, huge issue which would love to see avoided. It really blew up out of proportion when EG lost the remake, pulled out of the tournament, and made a stance. But it happens, and basically Dota has to move on. Future events have to learn from this. They basically, for one, can't have these problems. They have to make sure their rules basically don't have any of these sort of well, not really a loophole, because it was just basically they need to make sure their rules are fair. And finally, they have to really make sure the players are getting what they want. Moving on anyways, we're going to go back, talk through the group stage here, because I'm fed up talking about that drama. Not really. I could talk for days and days. We're going to go back, look at this group stage. What happened throughout the group stage? Basically, there were a few surprises. There was one surprise, but we're going to get to that last. The top out of the bracket, you saw Nirvana CN just dominating their way through. Myth Trusts proved to be the sort of main opposition there. They went down to the loser bracket. No real surprises at all in this top half of the bracket. It went as expected. Nirvana CN making it through to the winner bracket final, where they face IG. So bottom half of the bracket, this is where things were interesting. IG versus DK for starters. This is the round of 8 match. Two Chinese powerhouses. IG beat DK. DK, who just won WDC, and basically considered the best in the world at the moment, lost to IG, which is the IGY, IGZ merged together, form some superpower thing, Captain Planet, brought to you, just being full of awesomeness, and they beat DK. So they were looking pretty unbeatable. As soon as you beat DK, it's like, well, crap, who can actually stop these guys? Who can beat these guys? Then, at the bottom round of 8 match, here is the big news. Mineski beat LGD. Mineski, the Filipinos, defeating one of the top Chinese teams, who've reformed without ZSMJ, now playing with the new carry Sylar, who's sort of, they've improved, they've done better. LGD have beat DK the last 3 or 4 times they've played, so LGD are definitely one of the top teams. They beat DK in official matches, not actually like big tournaments like WDC, but they beat DK, so they're obviously one of the top teams here, and people were expecting them to finish in the top 3. Some people were expecting them to win the tournament. So that was a huge upset. Philippines went crazy, and wow, it was just massive. So that was the big upset in the bottom part of the bracket there. Then you have Mineski versus IG, where IG once again proved that they are just scary, hard to beat. We're going to talk a bit more about some of these games in depth with the hero picks, the actual drafts and playstyles of the team. But yeah, so the bottom half of the bracket, you see IG defeating Mineski, and then IG versus Nirvana CN in that winner bracket final. And once again, IG just looked scary, unbeatable. They gave Nirvana CN a first pick Lycanthrope, and then they just picked up a Panda and Necrolite draft. So they picked up 2 sort of unseen heroes, Panda and Necrolite, and just wow, they obviously just thought through those metagames so well and made it to the grand finals. The loser bracket, this is where there's more matches, so I guess there's more to be actually talked about. The first interesting match was MUFC versus Orange. Both these teams obviously being a bit disappointing in their results. They both lost their first round in the playoffs, but this is a grudge match. I mean, these are the two top Malaysian teams who've had a few matches in the past. There's been some banter going back and forth, but MUFC coming out on top this time, and that was when Mushi said, I've had enough, I'm out of here. I'm going to start coaching this team, and is no longer actually part of the Orange lineup. So hoping the best for them in the future, and hoping they can reform as a stronger team. So MUFC then went on to verse LGD, who lost to Mineski. LGD, no surprise there, defeating MUFC as LGD, they're just a Chinese powerhouse. DK, having lost to IG fairly early on, got put up against Immortality, who did get... Firstly, Immortality versus G7. I'm trying to think what happened here, and then Immortality G7. I believe Immortality won that match. I'm actually not sure if this is correct. I think G7 may have beat Immortality, because I think it was DK versus G7 in this match. So we're going to say this was Immortality or G7. I think it may have been G7 who won this. But DK get through. They didn't win WDC for no reason. They make it through, where they will face LGD. At the very bottom here, we see a few sort of lesser-known Southeast Asian teams just making their way through. Neolution, MSPR, the Amateurs team, doing very well. They did come through. They won a match before being knocked down. They met KSJJ and actually won that match. So they made it through, and this is where things were interesting. LGD versus DK. The last 3 or 4 times LGD have beat DK, and once again they do it. So this is interesting because it sets up a rematch. LGD versus Mineski round 2. They met in the winner brackets where Mineski won, and they're going to meet again here. The results actually hasn't been penciled in, so spoiler alert, guys. And wow. So LGD versus Mineski, we have a little rematch here, which we will talk about in a second. And the bottom half, we have Mythtrust losing to Dynasty, and no surprise there. They go up against MSPR, which they win. Mythtrust really played well this tournament. They were just a very solid team overall, had some great results, and did make it to the top 4. I believe that makes them top 4 by beating MSPR. So Mineski versus LGD, the rematch, and it happened. Mineski won again. This was absolutely crazy. Mineski I could not believe it. So, I mean, with IG in the grand finals, we're going to go to my next screen with the loser bracket matches with LGD Mineski, and then the Mineski versus Mythtrust games. This was my favorite part of the tournament. Voila! The Filipino surprise! Yada yada yada. Let's see if there's room for me. Of course there's room for me. I'll just throw me in the middle. Nice and mini. Woo! There we go. The Filipino surprise. This was Mineski. This is a little recap of some of their plays, their drafts, what happened here. This, for me, was the favorite part of the tournament, and a lot of people agree. Mineski gained so many international fans here. Obviously, a lot of people do already dislike their passionate fan base. What I love about I'm going to go basically what I love about Mineski. I don't hide the fact I'm a huge Mineski fan. They're probably my favorite international team. Just because of, one, their playstyle. They're so innovative with their picks. Not so much the Bottle Crow guys. I mean, Bottle Crow isn't really a playstyle. It's just a laning decision. It's how they basically win their lanes. They use it to win their lanes. But their actual playstyle, they heavy ganking, aggression, their picks they love, their tinies, their DKs, their Queen of Pains. The heroes they pick is just so exciting to watch, and it's something that no other team replicates at the moment. And they do it successfully. They beat LGD. They beat these other top teams, and wow, I cannot believe how well they did. They ended up getting, spoiler, 3rd place at this event. 3rd place, they fell behind IG and Nirvana CN. That is something to be so proud of, and it was just my favorite part of the entire tournament. So, looking at a few of their games here, we've got the round of 16 match here to the top left of the screen. That's their round of 16 with the King Surfer. You see the tiny pick, the Windrunner, another token hero which they use so well. To the right left, that's the round of 8 match when they defeated LGD for the first time. They use a Slardar solo mid with Bottle Crow. Slardar Solamid. You're just thinking, where does that come from? Where do they come up with this? And it's just absolutely crazy stuff. As well as the Queen of Pain pick used successfully and defeated LGD there. Then you have the round of 4, the winner bracket semi-final where they lost to IG. That is on my other side. Up here. That one there, they lost this game. They tried a very interesting trialing with NA, Naga Siren, and Shadow Demon. I remember watching this game live and I'm just like, what are they doing? They didn't coordinate that well. They got out-farmed. They lost the other lanes. It was a bit one-sided, but I was just so excited to see such an unusual draft being brought out by them. And I was sad they lost, but at the same time, I'm like, wow, this is truly a team that will take risks, pick what they want. They'll play to their strength rather than play to the metagame. They're basically trying to define the metagame themselves, which is something I admire. Then moving on to the loser bracket, because they lost that game, they met LGD in their next. So this is something that I found most amazing. They versed LGD, then they versed IG, then they versed LGD again. They versed 3 Chinese teams in a row. They had the hardest bracket of any team going through this. I mean, that did well. I mean, apart from these teams that made to the very final who actually had to beat the best teams, they basically had a tough bracket. You can't really deny the fact their bracket was tough. They beat LGD again. There's no actual game information there. There's no replay because of a remake. So they beat LGD a second time. I heard they picked a Tiny, as well as some other, I'm not actually sure. The Tiny winner under the Weaver, they're sort of token heroes. Then we got into the epic game, Myth Trust versus Mineski. This was the loser bracket the match before the loser bracket final, and this was epic. They were getting completely owned by a farmed anti-mage. They won a huge long game, and it was just an epic game. Go check out the VOD, guys. It's on joindota.com. This was probably one of the most exciting matches of the tournament, and Mineski they pulled back from a game which everyone thought they had lost. This anti-mage had like B Fury and Heart in like 25 minutes or something ridiculous, and they ended up coming back and winning. Then we go on to the loser bracket final. This is Nirvana CM versus Mineski. They end up losing this game, but what I loved was the picks. This is over on the far right there. LOA, Shadow Fiend. LOA, where have you seen LOA? Where have you even seen Shadow Fiend recently? They picked some of the most unusual heroes. They end up losing, but seriously, this is if they win this match, they go on to the grand final, and they're pulling out a Lord of Avernus and Shadow Fiend pick. Kudos to you. My hat, tip of the hat. I don't know what to say. That is just some impressive stuff. I mentioned earlier someone saying EG were brave for boycotting the event. Well, talk about braveness. Mineski, picking these heroes, that is brave. That is something to respect. And this is, it's when you look at a team like Mineski, this is where I have to think, why didn't EG just play on through? They had a chance to make history. They could have come back from the loser bracket, made it to the grand finals, and won this event. Why not give it a go? That's where you have to truly admire the teams that do stick it out and just make the Dota scene awesome, which is Mineski, and all their fans who are just so passionate is another thing which is just great to see. So that basically is my entire segment dedicated to Mineski. I'm done. Big Filipino fanboy. It will end now with SMM over. But yeah, some great stuff coming out from them, guys. Definitely do go check out some of their VODs. And the winner of the overall tournament, we had IG versus Nirvana CN. IG taking out Nirvana CN. We're going to get onto my final words here as we do wrap up the actual happenings. What I found disappointing, all the matches were best of 1. Everything was best of 1. The grand finals was best of 3, but IG, because they were in the winner bracket, started up 1-0. They won the first game, and there was only 1 match. So everything was 1 match for a huge Dota tournament. I felt a little hard done by. I wanted more. It was there was a lot of delays, and things got postponed, so there wasn't time for more matches. So that was unfortunate. But 1 match for all these games was just a little not enough for me. I wanted more. I wanted to just keep seeing game after game of these top Chinese teams. Mineski, throw Mineski in there as well. I wanted to see more and more, and I think a lot of people are going to leave SMM thinking that was a bit disappointing. The hardware difficulties, the lack of the stream problems, the stream went offline quite a lot, and the fact that so few of the games actually got streamed. There was only 1 match on there were so many matches on at the same time, and only 1 being streamed, so that's always going to be disappointing. And final conclusions, IG just absolutely look unbeatable. The final match was very one-sided. They had a Syllabe get the Radiance up in 15-16 minutes. They just pushed on through. Business as usual. IG Zoo and Xuan playing the ES, I believe. as well as YYF playing the solo middle Batrider, I think it was that game. Basically, YYF and Chuan were the two players of the tournament for me. YYF he's basically proven he can lead any team to victory. He, for me, is the best captain of the year, and great stuff from him. And Chuan basically is the player of the tournament, player of the year maybe. Just some awesome stuff from him. And then their carries, Ferrari, Zhu, just doing such fantastic, basically spot-on play. But they just proved to be by far the best team in this tournament. Beating DK, obviously, very early on, was probably the toughest, maybe one of the toughest matches for them. But it happened early on, so you sort of leave feeling, you kind of wish the finals was IG versus DK in the best of 5, but it didn't happen. There was one match, IG versus Mineski, very one-sided, and unfortunately that was that. And congratulations to IG, guys. So I'm going to wrap things up here, as this went much longer than I expected. Voila. Thanks everyone who did tune in, and thanks everyone for watching my video here. You can follow me here on YouTube at youtube.com/godsstudios, or on Facebook. You can follow me when I'm going live with live match commentaries or with other sort of replay analysis. That's facebook.com/ggNetGods, and I'm on Twitter at @ggNetGods. That's the one. Thanks everyone. I'm Gods, as said, as you can see. It's all over the place. From Ghosty Gamers Broadcasting, and that was my SMM recap, so thanks everyone for tuning in. I'll be in IRC for the next 5-10 minutes if anyone does have any questions, comments, wants to discuss a bit. But that is that. And we'll be doing a few SMM, more sort of replay analyses coming up soon, hopefully. So thank you guys.